So it's the 11th of June 2025. We're sat here on the shores of Lough Gur. We're up the hill here now, looking out under a thatched roof across onto the water. And I'm here as part of the Lough Gur an Oral History Project. That's the working title of the project, where we speak to local people and gather some stories and different bits of knowledge and different bits and pieces in the area. And today we're going to hear about one of the interviewees, or the interviewers, I should say, a person who's going to be chatting to people on the project. We're up in the visitor centre here, and yeah, Brian, you might introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your connection with the area and your role here as well.
Brilliant, yeah. So my name is Brian Collopy. My official title is Operations Supervisor of the Visitor Centre. Essentially, I run the Visitor Centre. I'm from just outside Bruff, originally a place called Ardicahan. And I came home about 3 years ago to take on this position in Lough Gur. Now, I've worked here on and off for 10 years, I suppose, doing tour guiding at this stage. So really, when I came home 3 years ago, that's when it had kind of dawned on me, this idea of, not that, I should say, like, not that it's me who came up with the idea for doing the folklore project, but I suppose the importance of it dawned on me when I came back 3 years ago, as I started talking to local people, coming back, that you had this font of knowledge, or this well of knowledge here, that really was, compromise is the wrong word, but there was a generational divide there. And certainly I feel people under 40, maybe even under 50, they've grown up in a different world. So it's kind of fast passing by those last first-hand accounts we can get of what life was like, and really, like, people who are, people who've been born in the 21st century versus people born in the 30s and the 40s. It's just, their lifestyles they're entirely different, even though they're essentially occupying the same space at a different time. But if we don't capture it now, it will be lost. And so much of that stuff for people seems to be, they judge it almost, I suppose, as being unimportant, So for the last few years myself, I've been working on a place names project. So part of that then is looking at minor place names especially, and the amount of people who, I suppose, they assume it's not important knowledge, and maybe for some people it isn't, but for me, I don't think there's any greater joy than, when someone tells me a field name or a minor name or a name of a cross that I haven't heard before, and then you add it to this dictionary or this lexicon of local place names, and it gives the place its unique personality, and it also then shows and highlights the density of local knowledge that existed there, and that is declining, unfortunately. And I mean, this isn't a zero-sum game, of course. I mean, new names will come into existence as well, but it's Lough Gur, I suppose, if I can kind of take a step back and broaden out now, Lough Gur is an important place, and beyond the kind of, everywhere's lovely and everyone has the right to love their place, and everyone's place in its own right is important. But, if we kind of take an unbiased step backwards, Lough Gur is important in a national context, if not an international context, but certainly in a national context, in what it offers us all as a window into our shared past on this island. The fact that the continuous habitation from the Neolithic is evident in Lough Gur. You have this density of archaeology that really, I think, is unrivaled anywhere. And certainly in terms of domestic, I would say, lifestyle, that Lough Gur is unparalleled, because we have from the Neolithic right through to the modern era. Knockadoon is a 62-acre hill where people have lived almost without interruption for 6,000 years. And then layered on that is the folklore, which is what I've myself gotten more interested in. So the folklore kind of acts as almost as an alternative narrative of what was going on around here. And again, in Lough Gur, we're fortunate in that certain materials have survived, especially from that pre-famine period, which is, vitally important when people were still a Caitas Gaeilge around here, So that is there. So you have this mixture of landscape, which, in itself is quite attractive, landscape, archaeology, history, folklore, song even, and then you layer that with the community around here, which is, as someone who, I'm technically a blow-in, like, even though, I find it was from where I grew up, I can walk up a small hill and I can see Knockfennel, the hill we're looking at now, which is almost in one sense, I suppose, at the heart of, certainly it's the physical, what would you say, it's not the physical, but it's the non-lacustrine heart of Lough Gur, maybe Knockfennel, the highest hill. So I can see that from my house, but even though I can see it, so from, again, any outsider coming along would say, sure, he's from the area, I am from the next parish over. So, Lough Gur, the community is, there's a difference here, and maybe it's because the lake is surrounded by hills that it kind of has almost a protected quality, or a kind of you can define the parameters of it, the territory of it, you can define it quite easy, actually, I think, and that maybe has impacted the collective psyche of the community around here. So I think the community here is quite distinct. You know, it's not a Bruff community, it's not a Knockhaney community, it's not a Herbertstown community, it's the Lough Gur community. So I kind of then get to come in as an outsider, or maybe as an outsider who has the right keys to access local people, because even if I am an outsider, I'm a very close outsider, you know what I mean? And now I get to live in Lough Gur as well, so I get to kind of, you know, see it through all seasons. And that, I suppose, for me, if I'm being pompous about it, I suppose what I'm interested in is the idea, I suppose, of landscape biography. And I suppose living on the landscape is the important part of that, and then interacting with the community. And I suppose over time, I've actually come to kind of realise that, you know, with all this stuff, you come in at the obvious things, you see the stone circle, the wedge tombs, the castles, and these are obvious cultural lodestones or things that kind of draw us in. But then I suppose when you look at, really for me, the interesting thing now almost is the community, and it is the stories. And some of those stories might be pedestrian, they might be run-of-the-mill and ordinary, but I suppose I always kind of imagine in 1,000 years, the most everyday nondescript description of getting up and going to work would be a fantastic insight into the past. So everything we say for the future can only be a good thing. And Ryan Tuberty, who, you know, I wouldn't say I'm his biggest fan in the world or anything, but he said it one time there, I can't remember where, he said, you know, be a good ancestor. And, you know, even a stopped clock is right twice a day, I suppose, but that to me is the good thing to do, you know what I mean, the right thing to do. And also you have to keep pushing forward with the preservation and curation of the local culture and the local heritage, because if you want the next generation to be interested in it, you have to kind of leave a legacy to them, and hopefully leave unanswered questions even that will spur people on, you know. And that's, I suppose, for me, the people who have narrated the past are people who are very much still in part of my life. Owen Bresnan, Sean Pierre Riordan, J.F. Lynch, you know, all these people, obviously without going into the likes of Michael Quinlan and Tom Mack, you know, all these people have come along, and really I think what we're doing is just a continuation of their work, and hopefully our work then in turn is just Dahlia Hogan, I should have said, of course, as well in relation to folklore. And hopefully what we're doing again is just, you know, a next rung on a ladder, but a ladder that's still going to continue to climb or whatever is what I would hope, I suppose, you know.
And you mentioned, well, I mentioned, I think, where we are at the moment, Brian, we're looking out on the lake. We're in, I suppose, the visitor centre, and I guess anyone can come here, whether you're from another part of the world or a local and you want to just learn a little bit more or even spend some time. It's a lovely place here. It's a lovely setting. But like, what do you think local people's relationship is like with that, with the history here? Like, do people see the wood from the trees here? I guess we'll hear a little bit about that as we record with this project. But like, what's your sense of how local people interact with their own kind of heritage and folklore here?
Yeah, so it's a funny thing, isn't it? That, I mean, there's a sense here of history. I think it was Bobby Ryan, the artist, who kind of said that history is ever present here, and he's completely right. So it almost slaps you in the face, where you have to be aware of it. It's still, as you allude to, and you're not incorrect, that can to a certain extent be taken for granted. So I think a lot of people assume they know more about it than they do just from being here, as if they can kind of through osmosis alone ingest 6,000 years of history. So, but certainly, you know, John and George were doing the project with me. You know, they've got this deep abiding love of the place and this deep abiding knowledge of the place. And I mean, I'm always struck by, when I am talking to local people, how people who I wouldn't, you know, when we talk folklore especially, you know, they wouldn't ever mention it to me, and then in passing they say, oh, that happened. I've had it 2 or 3 times in recent weeks where people are aware of what I consider obscure pieces of knowledge, and then obviously it's just part and parcel for their thing. So and this is a thing actually, and this is another break that's happening, and we can't do anything massively about it, I don't think, is the older families here, the people whose parents were here and grandparents, the legacy carries on through them, because the stories carry on. So when new people come in, and it doesn't matter if a new person comes from Timbuktu or if they come from Bruff even, you know, it's just when new people come in, they mightn't necessarily get access to those stories. So that's just part and parcel of it. But certainly I think as a community, Lough Gur is very aware of where it is, and I suppose the longevity of it. But as I say, like, there's so few places really in Ireland where so much of that history is just there in front of you. Like, I mean, you'd nearly need to be blind, to be honest with you, not to kind of feel it as you go along. You know, I mean, every field, like, I'm constantly struck. I mean, obviously, we'll say I've done a lot of research around here, but you know, if I walk from here now, beyond field names and everything, there's a monument there, a standing stone there, Ringfort there. I mean, you're passing, you know, there's a non-stop story from the lakeshore here to Holy Cross. Like, you can just keep talking, just using stuff you're seeing with you in the fields before you get in again to the stories from the 19th century and all those other things as well, you know. So history, Ireland's history played out here. And I know it's not really a popularly understood thing. You can't farm the view. So the west coast of Ireland, and you know, I've lived in Connemara, you know what I mean, it's a beautiful place, but all of Ireland's history happened here. So the Neolithic farmers are here, you know. Gaelic Ireland goes on here. The Vikings are here. The Normans are here. The Tudor rebellions are here. The Munster, the Geraldine rebellions. Everything plays out here because the land is good. The land is rich. So if you want Ireland's story, like, the only thing we don't have is a round tower in Lough Gur, pretty much. You know what I mean? All of Ireland's history can be told to you, explained to you here using physical examples on the landscape, and that's pretty impressive to me, you know. And I suppose then the community carry a different, again, like I was saying, there's a mythological interpretation of the landscape. The community in turn have another understanding of it, and a lot of it's like there's a wedge tomb. It's called Labanamucha, so that's the name. Now, a lot of local people call it the Pig's Bed, which is the direct translation of it. I've never seen the Pig's Bed written down, but that's locally what it's called, you know. There's the Mossy Meadow is another one I was told the other day. I've passed it 10,000 times probably at this stage. Never heard that name. So, you know, there is things that only the community know, like, and I suppose, again, there's things the community know and the community don't probably realise that it's important that we record it or let other people know it. So unless we're there to kind of ask them about it, it's not going to be told. And I suppose a lot of people can be quite self-effacing when it comes to the knowledge they have, and that's I mean, it's a bigger thing. There's a whole multitude of issues there as to why people feel that way, but certainly there's a softness in the community, in the countryside, in the community, insofar as people are often reluctant to talk, or there's kind of a certain reticence to be too forthcoming. So, you know, you need to slightly cajole things out of people, but then when you do, you know, it's incredible the amount of stuff that people have. And as I say, just even, you know, I'm an eavesdropper is the thing I do, because especially at big events, it's an interesting thing. And just when I listen to people talk and you hear bits and pieces, you know, it's like when I came back a few years ago, I remember hearing someone talk about the Banshee, and I said, that's incredible. I said, there's no one in Ireland talking like this anymore. And a few years later, everyone's talking like that. They don't openly talk about it, but when guards are lowered, you know, and people kind of start, you know, people have experiences, and it's not something that we live in this 21st century technological world and we're worried about AI and everything. But all these people are having these experiences that, you know, their forefathers and foremothers had before them, and it's a funny thing. I think we have a veneer of modernity here, and I think maybe in Lough Gur it's easier to slip back into those kind of old feelings and those old ideas, you know. And as I say, to a certain extent, I mean, even as we look out here now, like, the landscape probably doesn't look that different than it did in the Neolithic. They cut a lot of trees down by then, so I mean, we're seeing a lot of trees regrowing here at the moment. There's very little evidence looking out that window on the actual landscape of people. You have the old wall over, which was the O'Brien's bullpen in the 19th century, and the Carrageen, and beyond that, you know, you can just about make out the patent aside of Knockadoon. But I mean, you know, it's not that different than what it was, you know what I mean? I suppose then that allows us to maybe drift back easier into the past and remember these things. But it's all layered, you know what I mean? It's something that as I get older again, when I started doing place names as an example around here, really it was the Irish stuff I was interested in. But I've realised now, it doesn't matter if the name is Irish or English, because it's all part of the story, you know what I mean? And it doesn't really matter if the name is 20 years old or 2,000 years old, because the name is the name, and the name has as much validity. So I ignored cross names at first, because the name of the cross is usually just the family that was there. But then I realised some people knew 3 and 4 names for the cross, because 3 or 4 families might have lived there over the last 50, 60 years. You know, some of the hills have names too that some people use and other people don't. But again, it gives you the names. And that's such a... Well, it's like this, where I'm from is in Bruff, right? Ardy Keohane in English, Ardy Keohane, Keohane's Heights, the heights of Keohane. Now, there's a hill over, Coffey's Hill, it's called, on the side of Killalock Hill. Now, no one really calls it Coffey's Hill anymore, but the Coffeys used to live there. But there's no difference. The only difference is when one sounds in Irish, it gives it a more magical air to people who don't speak Irish. But I mean, Coffey's Hill and Keohane's Hill, essentially the same thing, you know. So it is... the knowledge, I suppose, for me, if to try and kind of reel myself in a bit, the knowledge for me is out there in the community, and I suppose our job is to kind of provide a platform for them to express that knowledge, because really that's, I suppose, what I'm interested in, really, as a kind of a collector of these things, you know what I mean? And again, I'm not entirely altruistic about this. I get a deep satisfaction out of hearing these stories, hearing these place names and everything. So while I am kind of keeping one eye on posterity in the future, I massively enjoy too, and it gives me a sense of completion, I suppose, hearing these stories. And it changes. It's like if you know the names of trees and animals and plants around you, it changes your interaction. And we had John Breen here recently. He's a, I can't think of the word, fellow who studies insects, ethnologist or whatever the word is. He studies insects. And he was just saying, like, he identifies bees because of how they're buzzing, the sound of the buzz. And I was saying to myself, he's walking through the same world as I am, but it's an entirely different world he's experiencing because he's hearing a bee buzzing. And he says, oh, that's a minor bee. Now, I can't tell one buzz from the other. I'm just hearing a buzz, you know. And it's the same, I suppose. I can walk around here and I have the names of all the hills, I have the names of the stones, I have stories attached to them. So I'm walking in a slightly different landscape than your casual first-time visitor, you know what I mean? And I suppose maybe that's another part of our job here, is that we're going to make it that we're opening up Lough Gur to people that way because we're providing this information. And again, it's, for me, the fact that Dahi O'Hogan recorded stuff in the 70s, and that's something I've been doing work on myself, just looking at his stuff. That's a bit of a grandiose way of saying it. I wrote an essay on it. But now, to me, seems like the time to do it again. So we're nearly 50 years since that moment. So I was very conscious of the fact when I'm going through it that the young men who were young men in the 1970s are now old men. So they're the young men, when the old men who were interviewed in the 1970s, if I can say it in a cumbersome fashion, they're now the old men. So they have, it's this other generation. It's almost like a handing off of it. And again, in 50 years, you know, in 50 years, these people will be legends, really. Like, you know, as in 50 years, like, even, you know, the likes of Michael Quinlan, who died in 2018, he'll become like J.F. Lynch's to me now. This not altogether real figure. We know they were there and we recognise what they did on paper, but, you know, to kind of get living people to remember these people, it adds a new layer to them, you know, because, I mean, like, was it Tom McNamara, is a guy I never met, he was a Shanachie around here. Like, Tom Mac, to a certain generation, is this larger-than-life figure, but again, over time, here see it's just this form on the page. So I suppose the recorded voice offers something that is so much more evocative. And I mean, the written word is beautiful, but the written word is, it's very, well, I mean, it's almost inherently cautious, and you're almost, the person you write as isn't necessarily the person you are, because writing isn't as free-flowing, you know what I mean? Because we write, we edit, we write, we edit, and we edit ourselves. So whereas a person speaking freely, we can hear the nuance in their voice, the tone, even accents, because let's be honest, accents are shifting. So in 50 years, they're going to sound noticeably different. I was even teasing two of my nieces last night by using slang they use. It's all American slang, you know, the alpha, sigma, riz, mid, all these words like that. Like, they meant nothing when I was a child, and you would have probably been slagged when I was a child because you were so blatantly being American, you know what I mean? So stuff shifts. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure if you took the lads from the 1970s and they listened to me, they'd say he sounds incredibly posh or whatever. They might say he's posh, they might say he sounds rough, I don't know, but I'm sure I sound different to them, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's a great thing to do, I think, really, that we record these things. And it's, I suppose I like the idea too of, and I don't know if it's a self-indulgent thing or what, but that idea, I suppose, of, you know, long after I'm dead and dust, right, and in the ground, the idea that someone might sit down and listen to these recordings, not even the one of me now, I just mean any of the recordings we do, and they just get a buzz out of it, or a bit of satisfaction. Or if someone's doing genealogy in 100 years, and instead of it just being a name and a census, now they have a recording they can go to. And you say, you know, tis nice, do you know what I mean? To kind of, that they might momentarily think of us, you know what I mean, then when we're long gone, you know? And it might as well act as a kind of another line of defence for Lough Gur, I suppose. Because, I mean, there is always the fear that, you know, there's no certainties in life. Like, I mean, will people continue having interest in these things into the future? They might not. I mean, we're going into an era of massive uncertainty in terms of climate and land usage and food certainty and everything. So God knows what the future will be. So hopefully things like this will again act as a window, you know, a real window into it, you know. And again, it's so much of history has been stories of kings and politicians, you know, and that's not where most of us come from. Like, so it's to just record the ordinary voice of the ordinary people, I think, you know. And I mean, that's what, you know, that's what local history is. And I mean, folklore that's nearly what folklore is too, I suppose, is this uncodified worldview that isn't necessarily, it's not dogmatic, you know what I mean? So to record these things it's a good undertaking. It's a nice thing to do, and I think it's nice for the people we record, because I suppose it validates them and it shows, you know, what they know is worthwhile. And then it's good for posterity. And as I say, and you're probably the same as me, I just like doing it and I like the idea of it, you know what I mean? So I get a satisfaction out of it as well, you know?
Lovely. Well, I think you preempted many of my questions there. Yeah, it's really nice to hear. Really, yeah, I think you expressed so many nice things there in nice ways. And I had asked John the other night when we were doing a similar kind of chat about the project and what he'd hoped to get from it as well. I think you preempted some of it there, so I might go a bit more specific. If you imagine someone walking around here in 100 years or 500 years or whatever, and they still have speakers and headphones and whatever, and you could send them a message, whether it would be, oh, you should go and check in this area, or you should do such a thing, or look out for such a thing, or is there anything I know it's kind of a very abstract and tricky thing to imagine. Is there anything you might say to someone who happened to be listening further down the line?
I mean, I suppose there's so many places, isn't there? I mean, I would love to think my favourite place in Lough Gur is Lough, which is this ancient road that's never been excavated on the other side of the lake, so just beyond the Grangestone Circle. So, I mean, if it was me, I would say walk east of the Grangestone Circle, the entranceway, if it's still there, and hopefully there's still a field there that has two raised ridges running north-south, and they're about 15 metres wide, and that is an ancient road that, in my time at least, had never been excavated, and who knows, maybe in your time it has been excavated and fully understood. My feeling is that the road is 7 kilometres long and it connects the Camogue and the Callweir River, north and south of Lough Gur. That hasn't been proven yet. I wrote a paper in it in 2022 in the Lough Gur Historical Journal, if you want to read that. And that's my feeling, and I'd love to know what that is. I have this whole other idea about it being a big ceremonial loop that links with Bourne and Leagon as well, but that's what I would do. But I suppose the thing, climb up Knockfennel, because regardless of what happens, that might be gone. That site could be gone. But Knockfennel is a hill you would imagine will still be there. Climb up to Knockfennel on a summer's evening and look west and look out towards Knockfearna and Tory Hill over by Croom. Go to Knockdirk, the quarry, climb up on that and look out towards the west again, and on a good day you can see the Paps down in Kerry, you know what I mean? So those views won't change. The top of Knockfennel, again on a clear day looking north, you can see Limerick City. Those things won't change. Climb up to Carrigal first thing in the morning and you have this encompassing view. Carrigal is perfect actually, because in some ways I think Carrigal is, I know I just said Knockfennel was the centre of the world, or centre of Lough Gur, but there really is a kind of an all-encompassing view of the area on Carrigal, even though it isn't that high. And from there you can see pretty much all the hills around Lough Gur, maybe not Ardalooda, but you can see most of them certainly. And stand up there and just have a look, because that view won't change massively. The landscape underneath it there might be more trees, there might be no trees, it might be more urbanised, it might be hopefully less urbanised, not urbanised at all. But the hills will be there, the shapes of the hill will change, and unless a bomb is literally dropped on every hill, they'll stay the same. So, you will be looking at, broadly speaking, the same place. As I say, might have a slightly different dressing on it, and that's kind of humbling. And I suppose that's myself, what I like to do, I suppose, when I get onto these hills, especially, nice sunny evening, is maybe squint my eyes a little and, you can kind of feel that you're back in the past, you know what I mean? And maybe it all overlaps and maybe, we'll still be there as ghosts anyway to haunt you,
Brilliant.